Welcome to this week's episode of Aiding Your Game. Today we're going to talk about one of the challenges that every DM faces at least a couple of times in their campaigns. What do you do when a player just can't make a session? Let's jump into it. Thanks for joining. Before we jump into this week's content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're looking to grow, and when we hit 25 subscribers, we're going to be giving away 5 t-shirts to 5 subscribers at random. Hit that subscribe, follow, like, and share to help us grow. Now let's jump into this week's content. So you're prepping up for your game, you've got everything ready to go, and a player contacts you and says they're unable to make it. What do? This is a situation that happens to every GM at some point or another in their campaign, regardless if it's a ongoing 20-year campaign or just a new campaign that's barely begun. The first bit of advice that I would give is don't punish the player. Real life happens outside the game, and we all have to understand that complexities of life, whether it be work, family, or other commitments, just happen. I'm going to give you 3 examples of what I've done when faced with a player not being able to attend a campaign, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you can do in your own game to minimize these impacts and allow the adventuring party to grow from these types of impacts. Now, of course, situations will vary from group to group and even what adventure they're on. They could be deep in a dungeon and kind of hard to explain where that character may disappear to for one session. They may be traveling through a realm and working for a caravan wagon, and what would that character be doing in that missed session? As an example from a recent campaign of mine, I had a party who was clearing out a ruined tower, and one of the players was unable to make the session. So while they were in a long rest in between the game sessions, the next day I had that player go and scout around the location. That way the rest of the party could continue going through the tower and clearing it out, and it would not disrupt that primary story element from happening. The character was given a couple of tidbits of information that they found while scouting that they were allowed to bring back and provide to the party to give some plot hook and a little bit of environmental information. That way the player still felt connected to the game. Even though they missed the session, they still had information that was impactful to the group, and upon returning, when provided to the group felt that they weren't just an absent character, that they actually had some type of interaction with the game world. This really helps for immersion as well as continuing that group dynamic of the players working as a team. And it allows the occasional missed session to not end up with nothing being fruitful. This was a great opportunity for the player to continue in the game even though he had a commitment outside of the game session. Now, there may be times where a player will have to miss multiple sessions, and as long as there's good, strong communication, again, you can work that into your campaign to your and the character's benefit. In my example, we were in a campaign where the party was going through the outer planes. When the character let me know that they were going to be missing a few sessions, at the time they were on Pandemonium, and I had the remainder of the party on the next game session wake up to the character missing. He had gone mad and gotten up in the middle of the night and began wandering, holding his ears. I worked this in a little bit of a dream sequence, in that one of the characters, while stirring in the night, looked up to see their friend standing watch but holding his ears and pacing. When they woke up, he was gone. The party had a couple of options. They could either go looking for their missing companion or continue on the main quest. I had already set this up a little bit ahead of time because they were on a time crunch. They knew they couldn't just spend time wandering Pandemonium. They needed to get the job done. What they decided to do as a group was to leave sigils and markings for the direction they were going, along with a crest, so that if that wandering party member came across them, they would be able to follow. This was a fantastic group dynamic in that they left the door open themselves for the character to return to the party, even if it's down the line. Unfortunately, that player was not able to come back to the game, and so to this day, they're still out there, wandering Pandemonium. But they had a good hook to be able to rejoin the party later on down the line and come through a portal at some point and actually thanking the party members for leaving a path for them to follow. So look at what environment options can lead to the player being absent for a time, but then whether it's the party themselves or you as the GM, making sure there's a way to bring them back into the fold. And also by giving them a breadcrumb or two when they're returning, they can bring something to the group to kind of give that thanks for allowing that pause from the sessions. Leads to fantastic group dynamics. Now, there are times where a party member does have to leave permanently. The example before was one of those instances, but was not planned that way. So I'm going to use a different example from the same campaign, but much earlier on. One of the primary characters, who was a warlock and very charismatic and almost the face of the group, the player was moving and knew he would not be able to continue. At the time, we were just doing in-person games much earlier than when the pandemic started. With the player character, I wanted to make sure that it was an in-story exit that still allowed for an opportunity for a return, should there ever be a chance, but something that felt a little more permanent. Because of the background of the character and a fairly early level, it was obvious in-game that the character was looking for added power and more opportunity to grow and develop from his patron, who was a fiend. Utilizing their last game session, I set it up as more of a dream sequence to where he was communicating with his patron, asking for more power, more clout, and more opportunity to grow in power. And utilizing the patron's desire to fiendishly utilize this mortal for his own benefit, he agreed to give him this massive power boost. However, it would take a time of service for the patron in his own realm. He brought the player to his own realm, and it really established for the other players that this character who they came to depend on for the face was going to be leaving for a long time, possibly never to return because of his fiendish pact. The dynamic with the players was fantastic, and they still keep in communication to this day. So it's a great way, again, by utilizing the group dynamic to allow for a very character-driven exit from the story. On the flip side, it may be time for a player to leave or a player character to be expelled from the group. These are a lot more challenging than when it's just a one-off or a couple of sessions missed due to outside interference. But what do you do if the player or the player character does not mesh well with the group? After all, tabletop role-playing games are primarily designed for group play, an opportunity for friends and families to play together as a group. When you have a player or character who does not mesh well with the group, whether it's because the character does not have the same motivations and desire, or is at odds with other characters or the storyline itself. Or maybe the player's just an asshat. Regardless, there are times where you have to have a character exit the group without much opportunity for inclusion further on. My example, I had a paladin who was very much into splitting the group, doing his own thing, and almost throwing the others under the bus. He did not mesh well with the other player characters, and for the players, he did not do much communication or attempt to play together well with the other players. We tried to resolve it over a number of sessions, but when it was obvious it wasn't going to work, I had to let him go. I had the other characters wake up to find him gone. The fire at the fire pit where he was supposed to be on watch was cold. There was his symbol scratched in repeatedly around the fire pit in the dirt. Throughout the next few sessions, I had NPCs mention about this ferocious armored warrior going through and speaking of crazy vengeance and ancient pacts and empires that had been gone for years before being just brutally savage to the NPCs of the world. This really drove my PCs to realize that this person had turned, and not for the better. I utilized this character as a minor villain, and over time established that the actions that the character took in-game had consequences. This did two things. It gave the characters an opportunity to overcome this villain and have that bit of satisfying revenge almost, without it being very aggressive or out of spite for the player. It was character driven. I utilized the flaws that the player had built into the character and had played the character to really utilize him as the game world would have viewed this character. So he became a villain, and the players had to overcome this villain. It was a great story arc for me as well, because there was a villain that I didn't have to do from scratch, and I was able to pepper him in the background until he became a major storyline. And it was an opportunity for me to utilize one of the challenges that I had overcome to a benefit to create more story arc, and to reinforce to the player that bad actions will have bad consequences, because whether you're a murder hobo or whatever, if you're taking part in my good campaign as an evil character, who's to say that a party of strong adventurers won't come after you? I do want to mention that just because a character does not fit well with the story, or the player does not mesh well with the others, does not give you a good license to just go through and make that character a villain and have the others go murder hobo out of spite. If there are story elements that you can utilize to it, if the character was used as a villain in a good campaign, for instance, or maybe reversing that, if there was a good character in an evil campaign where it makes a good story arc and plays well into your story synopsis, then it works well. But never utilize this out of spite. I know I didn't. I still keep in contact with that player to this day, and while he doesn't agree that I should have used his character as a villain, it's something that we can easily discuss and agree to disagree on, and not hold a grudge towards each other. And that concludes this week's video. We hope you enjoyed and found some enlightenment. Be sure to leave a comment of a time that you were faced with a player absence and how you dealt with it. I'd love to hear your comments and get your feedback and see if some of our techniques match some of yours. And, of course, communicate together so we can all help grow the community. Be sure to join us next week as we discuss preparation for game sessions for newer DMs and GMs, and talk about the differences of total improv versus too much preparation. the pitfalls of each and how we can best balance between the two ends of the spectrum. Until then, make sure to let us know, where will your adventures take you? Thank you for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed. Here's an additional video that we feel you may like, and be sure to hit the subscribe button as we continue to grow and develop. Our first milestone of 25 subscribers is going to lead to 5 of those subscribers drawn at random to receive a free t-shirt. Make sure to share and help us grow. Thank you, and be sure to comment below. Where will your adventures take you?